At the bottom of a Hawaiian waterfall, there's a fish about the size of your finger staring up at a wall of falling water taller than a 30-story building. For this fish, that waterfall isn't scenery, it's a staircase, and it's about to climb the whole thing. Not by jumping, not by swimming up, by gripping the bare, soaking wet rock and hauling its own body upward. Inch by inch for hours, up a climb that can reach 100 meters. Scaled to your size, that's like free climbing a cliff nearly 10 times the height of the Empire State Building. In the rain, without hands. And here's the detail that makes biologists do a double take. It's climbing with its mouth, using the exact same movements it uses to eat. Now, halfway around the planet, in the black dark of a cave in Thailand, there's another climbing fish, and it does something stranger still. It doesn't inch, it doesn't wriggle, it walks on 4 points with the side-to-side gait of a salamander, which is a bit of a problem, because walking like that is supposed to be the thing that separated us from the fish, and this one clearly didn't get the memo. So today, how does a fish climb a waterfall? Why on earth would it want to? And what can a finger-sized mountaineer tell us about the day life first dragged itself out of the water? The day that eventually led to you. To understand the climb, you have to understand the life these fish are trapped inside. The waterfall climbing goby lives in the fast, clean streams that pour down the sides of volcanic islands. And it has one of the strangest life cycles of any animal, a cycle called amphidremy. Here's how it traps them. The adults live upstream, in pools above the falls. They spawn there. But when the eggs hatch, the tiny larvae get swept over the edge, down the waterfall, and flushed all the way out to sea.
So these babies spend their first months as helpless specks of plankton, drifting in the open ocean. And then, months later, the survivors ride the currents back to shore, swim up into the stream mouth, and hit a wall. Literally. The same waterfall their parents live above is now standing between them and the only place they can grow up and breed. They can't go around it. There is no around. If they want a future, the only way is up. So evolution handed them a set of tools.
Every one of these gobies is born with a suction cup on its belly, a disc formed from its pelvic fins fused together. That's the anchor. It lets the fish clamp onto slick rock in water moving fast enough to blast a person off their feet. Some of the climbers use that anchor in a burst and grip style, a quick, powerful surge. Clamp, surge again. Fast climbers. But the star of our story, a Hawaiian goby called the Nopoli rock climbing goby, does something else entirely. It inches. Because this fish has a second sucker, and to get it, the fish has to rebuild its own face. When the young goby returns from the sea, it goes through a 2-day metamorphosis. Its mouth, which had been pointing forward like a normal fish, physically migrates down and under its head, and in doing so, that mouth becomes a second suction cup. So now the fish has two, one on the belly, one where its mouth used to be. And it climbs like an inchworm. Mouth sucker up, grip. Belly sucker up, grip. Mouth, belly. Mouth, belly. A slow, relentless crawl up a cliff made of falling water. Which is already a remarkable machine. But it's not the twist. This is the twist. That same downward-facing mouth has another job. Between climbs, and for the whole rest of the fish's life, it's a feeding tool. The goby uses it to scrape a film of algae and tiny diatoms off the rocks. Protrude the jaw, scrape, retract. Over and over. Protrude, scrape, retract. If that rhythm sounds familiar, it should, because in 2013, a team of researchers filmed these gobies both climbing and eating, frame by frame, and measured exactly how the mouth moved. And the movements were essentially the same.
The motion this fish uses to eat its dinner is the same motion it uses to scale a 300-foot waterfall. And that raises a genuinely deep question, one that reaches way beyond this one fish. Which came first? Did an ancient goby evolve a climbing motion and later repurpose it to feed? Or did it evolve a feeding motion and later repurpose it to climb? The researchers couldn't say for sure, and that uncertainty is the whole point. Because what they'd caught this fish doing is one of evolution's favorite tricks, a thing called exaptation.
Exaptation is when a feature that evolved for one job gets quietly borrowed for a completely different one. Feathers that started as insulation and became flight. Swim bladders that became lungs. And in this fish, a mouth that eats became a hand that climbs. Evolution rarely builds a brand new tool from scratch. It grabs whatever's already lying around and gives it a second job. Keep that idea in your head. Old part, new purpose. Because it's about to become the entire story. Because there's another climbing fish, and it borrowed something far, far older.
Deep in a cave system in northern Thailand lives a fish almost nobody ever sees. It's barely an inch long. It has no eyes. Generations in total darkness erase them. It's so rare and so protected, it was studied for years before anyone properly filmed how it moved. It's called the waterfall climbing cavefish, or more evocatively, the cave angelfish. And when scientists finally watched it climb the waterfalls inside its cave, they saw something that shouldn't exist.
It wasn't wriggling. It wasn't using a sucker. It was walking. Front left and back right, then front right and back left. The same diagonal, side-to-side gait a salamander uses. In a fish, that should be impossible. And to find out why it wasn't, in 2016, a team led by biologist Brooke Flaming looked inside its body.
In basically every other fish on Earth, out of some 30,000 species, the pelvic bones are barely attached to anything. They just float in a little sling of muscle. There's nothing solid to push against, which is exactly why fish don't walk. But this cavefish had built something different. A broad, sturdy pelvic girdle fused into a single plate and bolted directly to its spine through a reinforced rib. Its backbone had grown extra anchor points and ridges for muscle. It had, in effect, grown itself a hip. A real, weight-bearing hip. The kind of structure that, in you, connects your legs to your spine and lets you stand up against gravity. No other fish has anything like it.
And this is where a tiny blind fish in a Thai cave becomes a window onto one of the most important moments in the history of life. Because roughly 375 million years ago, some of our own fishy ancestors faced a version of the same problem this cavefish faces today. How do you move your body against gravity, out of the buoyant water, across a solid surface? The animals that eventually solved it, creatures like Tiktaalik and the first tetrapods, did it by evolving sturdy limb girdles and weight-bearing hips. That transition is the reason there are amphibians and reptiles and birds and mammals. It's the reason there are legs at all. It's the reason you can stand up and walk across a room.
Now, here's the part it's important to get right, because a lot of headlines got it wrong. The cavefish is not our ancestor. It's not a living fossil, not a relic that crawled out of the deep past and forgot to change. It's a modern fish, on its own modern branch of the tree of life.
What makes it extraordinary is that it faced a similar problem, moving up against gravity, out of the flow. And evolution reached for a similar solution, completely independently, hundreds of millions of years later.
That's called convergent evolution. And it's arguably more profound than a relic would be, because it suggests that when life needs to walk against gravity, there may only be so many ways to build a body that can do it, and evolution keeps finding the same answers over and over on different branches. The cavefish didn't inherit the tetrapod blueprint, it reinvented it.
So think back to that finger-sized goby, still climbing, still inching up its impossible waterfall with a mouth that was built for eating. And that blind fish in the dark, walking up wet stone on a hip it was never supposed to have. Neither of them is trying to make a point about evolution. They're just trying to get upstream, to grow up, to not get washed back out to sea. But in solving that very small, very personal problem, they've each stumbled onto one of evolution's oldest tricks, taking a part built for one job and quietly handing it another. A mouth that becomes a grip, a pelvis that becomes a hip. It's the same trick that a very long time ago turned a fish's fins into an ancestor's first tentative steps onto land.
So the next time someone tells you a fish could never climb a waterfall or walk, you can tell them the truth. It's already been done. Twice. By accident. And once, a version of that accident led all